Okay, we're recording. We're good.
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready?
Go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So we'll just kind of. I mean, I'm so excited that we we connected a while back through social media.
Yeah.
And I've just kind of been following along with your stuff, and we were talking about people that we really wanted to talk to and what topics we wanted to cover for our podcast. Um, and yeah, came across one of your posts one day and saw that you were on another podcast, and I was like, heck yeah, let's see if we can make it happen. So excited that we found time to sit and chat.
Yeah,
Um,
likewise.
yeah. So let's just, I guess, start by giving us your background because we've never met in person.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about, yeah, I'm Jen and this is Cameron. We yeah, do the Through the Line podcast and PowerX Performance, and yeah, so just kind of give us your background and where you're at and what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. So I started my performance journey when I started as an intern at sports performance intern at Siena College when I was in undergrad. I actually graduated from undergrad with a psych major and a health science minor. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but started interning there when I was a junior in college, and then kind of fell in love with it from there. Realized I wanted to go to. I had realized I wanted and kind of had to go to grad school for what I wanted to do, and so obviously wanted to seek out more exercise science knowledge, being that majority of my classes weren't in that in undergrad, and so um, I ended up my senior year taking like 6 classes each semester to try to at least the first semester to try to fit all my requirements in for grad school, and so did that and got into Merrimack College. They were really good accelerated program, 1 year program, master's program with a fellowship. My fellowship was at Tufts University, so I worked at Tufts as a strength coach, and then went to grad school full time at Merrimack College. So the two were like probably 30 minutes apart from each other. Um, Loved Tufts. Loved Dan Kopsko's phenomenal mentor. I mean, I'll shout him out every time. And same with my mentor from Siena, Ian, was probably the first person that realized my potential as a coach, and that I could connect with athletes on a different level than most people. And so it was really those two that kind of created my brand, or my helped me find my coaching voice, if you will, for lack of a better term. And so um, I was at Tufts for only like 6 months, and then Dan recommended me for a job at St. A's, St. Anselm Division II in New Hampshire. And so then I was like the first person in my grad school class to go get a job. And I don't think I was, like, at the time very mentally prepared for the amount of teams I was going to have. I had about 7 teams to myself, 22 years old. So some of the athletes were older than me. So it's kind of like how do you garner that respect? I think I learned how to do that through my actions and through my leadership style, but it definitely was an adjustment. Being responsible. I had all my certs and everything. My educational background was solid, and I was still completing my master's while I was going to school, or while I was working at St. A's for the rest of the time there. But it was a good learning experience. I mean, I was there on an interim assistant contract, and took care of baseball, women's soccer, men's soccer, tennis, cross country, and assisted with football, and then assisted with golf as well. Yeah, so I had a pretty hefty bunch of teams, but it was, I mean, when it comes down to coaching, I think the easiest part, that's always been the easiest part for me, is relating to the athletes and building those relationships, because at the end of the day, like, I'll say, I'll shout it from the mountaintops, is that our job is more than reps and sets. It's goes way deeper than that. If a coach doesn't think that, then they're not going to make an impact as far as they want to. And so I quickly learned that early on in my career, which are lessons some coaches may not learn that quickly and that fresh into their career. After St. A's, I was at Wagner for a little bit, which is a Division I school in Staten Island, New York. Staten Island's a wild place, man. I don't even know how they consider that a borough of New York City, because I got family. My brother lives in Brooklyn. My mom was from the Westchester area, so we grew up around the city a lot. I'm from Connecticut originally, so I went into New York City a lot, and I had never been to Staten Island until I started working there, and it's a crazy place. But Wagner was cool. I was working with football a ton. And that's kind of when I realized, along the stops along the way, I had a couple supervisor, a couple bosses they were amazing, like I mentioned, and I had a couple that were, just I necessarily learned kind of how I don't want to coach or how I want to be, and I think learning from other people's styles and seeing different perspectives is the way you grow as a coach and as a professional in general. So I think it was definitely, that can be just as valuable as learning what you want to be. And so I just, what I was realizing in the college setting, especially, and I love college strength and conditioning, and I loved working with teams. One thing I think that I miss the most, now being where I am is working towards a championship with teams. Definitely is something I miss. I see a lot of I have so many friends in the college strength and conditioning industry that they're posting about going to NCAA tournament, that kind of stuff. And, that stuff I definitely miss, but at the end of the day, I know my core purpose, and it's to serve others in any capacity I can. And my joy is seeing the athlete succeed, and I can still do that in my position. It's just their individual success. And so I left Wagner for an opportunity in Albany, New York, which is actually kind of funny because it kind of came full circle. I went to school here and worked at Siena, and then in this area, and then I kind of came back to a facility in this area. But I took the head strength and conditioning role at Impact Athletic Center, and I've been here for 2 years. 24 college commitments the first year. I literally put the racks helped bolt the racks in myself. So it's my baby for sure. It's not my facility. There's owners of it's a huge athletic center, and my weight room's 4,200 square feet on the side of the building. So you get a tremendous amount of, there's a bunch of basketball courts and volleyball courts. So I get a lot of basketball, a lot of volleyball players, which are tremendous athletes, tremendous people. And then I think with my background, it kind of has drawn a lot of football kids and plenty of baseball athletes as well. So I get a good mix of athletes. But it definitely, it was an adjustment. I think I'm able to make more of an impact here because of the fact I can work on my anxiety and athletes initiative and kind of incorporate things outside of strength and conditioning into my work more, which is something that at the college realm, whether it's right or not, they don't let you really be your own brand. And I think for coaches, that's so huge. Is because if the school went under, you're out of a job, and now you have no other identity but the school. Not saying that that's going to happen or it happens often, but or if you get fired, or for some coaches, right, for some strength coaches, they're attached to a certain head coach and they're moving with that head coach everywhere. And if that head coach, stops coaching, all of a sudden your career is kind of done. And so I think becoming my own person and my own brand and kind of my own, finding my own niche, whatever you want to pronounce it. My mom will probably listen to this podcast and text me and be like, it's niche. But, it just kind of made me realize that whether we like it or not, we are our own people. And, I say it all the time, maybe it sounds a little bit morbid, but if I had dropped dead at that school, they were going to replace me the next day.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And here I'm part of a team that values me, and the athletes that wouldn't know where to turn, kind of, if I left, and I think they would be looking for my suggestion, and I think it's a value. The value of loyalty goes a long way, and finding somewhere that truly values you. And so obviously going from an assistant to a head strength coach position was a no-brainer to begin with, but leaving the college setting was definitely not easy by any means, because I like that setting a lot. I love being on a college campus, love being around the kids, but taking that experience and then showing a lot of high school athletes. I have college athletes here in the summers and during the breaks, and then I've had a few pro athletes, but it's mainly high school athletes. So it's taking that experience that I had and bringing it to an area that high school kids haven't been in that area, at that level yet, and showing them what that level entails, and the standard of taking care of your body and holistic health and wellness, and taking care of your body like a college athlete, and what that level really entails, and showing them how to be at that level, so then when they get to college, they're the physically prepared freshman that's ready to go. And then the other thing was just, like I said, anxiety in athletes was a huge thing to me. I had realized in the college setting, because of my personal journey through high school that I'm happy to share about. Mental health advocacy was almost a bigger deal to me than strength and conditioning. And whether schools like that or not, I mean, I know I was at one school that told me that I was on a podcast one night, and the next morning I met the AD for the first time, because he never came around, but he came around after he heard I did a podcast talking about my mental health journey. And he told me I couldn't do that, and that they didn't want a coach. They didn't want to be around a coach, or they didn't want to have a coach on staff that was open about their mental health struggles. And so to me, like, that's a huge red flag as a university, as as an institution. And then, but I knew I couldn't break that mental health stigma from the inside. I knew I kind of had to be on the outside and share my experiences and break it from the outside. And so, after leaving that institution, I realized that, like, okay, it's time to find a place where I can completely be myself, and then also be able to grow anxiety in athletes and break down that mental health stigma in athletics, because it's like, I mean, I saw it with football the most, because I think it's just, a barbaric, I think the gladiator sports, it's just like, I played football. I have so much love for football. Like, people hear me talk about how, like, I think there's a lot of toxic masculinity and this macho man culture, and it's like, oh, he hates football. No, I literally love football. It's one of my favorite sports. But, like, there is this weird stigma around more aggressive sports that, like, you can't share your feelings, or that, like, too bad, suck it up, be tougher. And I think it's carried down into into non-barbaric sports too. And it's kind of like, for what? So kids can bottle up their emotions, and for us to lose kids, because that's what's happening. And so to me, like, it took a little while to realize, like, what was most important to me, and what's most important to me is to serve those other to serve people in that capacity, as well as in performance.
Yeah. There's so much stuff that I want to, like, circle back to and unpack.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, I think something I pride myself in with my athletes, but while keeping boundaries and stuff, is I'm an open book. I think when the vulnerability is shown and the ego's dropped, that's when relationships form. So.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Tom, you said that you learned pretty early on in your coaching career about the lack of emphasis and how you were going to make more of an emphasis on mental health. Was there, like, a certain situation or a certain, like, point? Because you're right. Like, most coaches don't learn that side of things. If it's throughout their whole career or really late in their career, did you have, like, a certain experience that you feel like that was the start of, well, I need to put a bigger emphasis on mental health?
Yeah, actually, I think there was a few scenarios. I think the one that made me realize that my story resonates with people, because I share my story, and when I started sharing my story, I was still going through treatment, and I was 18 years old when I first started, or 17 years old when I first started sharing my story. My first talk I ever did was a keynote at a small mental health awareness event at Yale University. But and when you share your story to start, and even now, if there's, when I do my podcast and share stuff, or when I go to places and speak, if it's one person that is affected and feels less lonely or resonates with my story, then I did my job, right? Like, I don't do it to get 900,000 views. Obviously, I want maximum exposure because that means the most people are going to see it, right? But if it means that I affect one individual, that's one individual maybe I saved, or one individual that I was that kid that was lonely and was bringing his books home because he didn't want my parents to have to clean out my locker. I was that kid that was struggling with suicidal ideation and didn't feel any purpose to live anymore. So for me, it was like, there was one situation where an athlete, when I was at the college level, like, saw a video I did about my mental health and kind of started opening up to me about just gravitating to me more about what they were dealing with. And that's when I realized like we put these athletes on pedestals, right? And for people that never played college sports or even high school sports, you see them in the comments like, why don't they do better? Why don't they do this? And it's so easy to speculate about what somebody could do better when you're not living in their shoes and when you don't know what's going on. And I think what I've realized more and more as time went on is that these athletes are human, and that they're human first, not athlete first. I mean, you need to treat them as humans first. So I think it was more, obviously without getting into detail, the athlete confiding in me, and then seeing other coaches' responses to that athlete opening up about their mental health, some being positive, some being negative, and that athlete feeling pressure to not share and only share with me. Because like no athlete should ever be penalized for share. They wouldn't be penalized for sharing about a strained hamstring or a torn ACL, right? ACL recovery is so applauded, right? As it should be. It's a tremendous recovery, mental and physical. But like, what about eating disorder recovery? What about, someone dealing with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or OCD that struggles to get out of bed in the morning, but still makes that decision to fight that anxiety? That's just as impressive.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what are some things, I guess, that you're doing to help break the stigma? And I'll kind of give some background too. Coming from a college background, it's a little easier. This is part of the reason why we started PowerX Performance and why we kind of have not similar stories to you, but similar feelings when you were talking about making that transition from college to where you're at now. And I think we saw a lot of the same things, and we saw athletes that were viewed more as trophies than they were as humans, that they were going to be bonuses and rings and everything else. And
100%.
they're waking up dealing with anxiety and eating disorders. That is somewhat encouraged by their coaches, unfortunately.
100%. 100%.
So I know from my perspective, I think now maybe we're able to have more of these conversations with athletes because we own our own business and we're not affiliated with a specific school.
Right.
But what are some things like, how do you bring up these conversations? How do you go about making athletes comfortable to talk to you? What are some things that you try to do within your own coaching to make, I guess, mental health more of like a forefront of importance for athletes?
Yeah, definitely. No, I think you make a good point. Like, it is a lot of times, especially, I think strength coaches are getting more and more knowledgeable about this stuff, and I think it's getting better within strength and conditioning. But I think sport coaches definitely can encourage behaviors, mainly without even realizing. And I saw that so many times because they're always preaching work harder, work harder, work harder. And then the performance coach is like, no, we're literally monitoring their GPS. Like, they need to not work as hard. Like,
Yeah.
so like I think the introduction of sports science and the prevalence of that has shifted. If you're a performance coach that is truly about the holistic health and wellness and development of an athlete, and don't say you are and not do these things, then you're studying sports science, you're studying mental health, you're trying get advantages of how to take care of athletes. But I think the main thing that I do within programming, the use of VBT has been huge. And obviously I know not everybody has that type of technology, but one unit from Rep 1 costs like $400, right? The biggest thing about I'll get on my soapbox like real quick. The biggest like aha moment I had about, the 4 universities and colleges that I was at is that like when they say they don't have the money, it's the biggest load of shit in the world, because it's where you allocating your resources, because you're paying your damn head coach $200,000. So like, and he's winning 4 games a year. Like, I don't know, like, invest in your athletes. Don't post the May mental health awareness graphic once a year and say you're about the student athletes, when you're literally allocating all your resources to a coaching staff that doesn't give a shit about your athletes. Like, so,
100%.
I think that's kind of like been the MO about we don't have the money. It's like, no, find the money, relocate or reallocate the resources and find the money for those resources. And so that's why I really raised the money. Like, there's a school, I'll shout them out, Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut. I lived very close to there. Chris Feed has built that department from the ground up, and he does a fundraiser every year that raises money for his department. And that's at a college. So like, and it raises thousands of dollars. So like, there are ways to get access to that sports science, and maybe not to the level of a Power 5 school, like a University of Arkansas or Oklahoma or Alabama, but like, you can get your hands on this stuff, and there's companies that are willing to work with you and try to make deals with you. Okay, sorry, side tangent. But the use of VBT to auto-regulate programming, so putting somebody in between a range of like, this is from a total physiological standpoint of like, they're stress on their body, they're stress on their mind. Okay, today we're going to hit between 0.5, 0.8 meters per second. Keep it between those ranges. If you're not hitting those ranges, lower the weight. So automatically you're reducing the load and attacks on their body, because they're maybe they got in a car, a fight in the car with their mom before they walked into my facility. You know what I mean? So, or had a bad day at school, whatever it is. Second thing is wellness checks within the programming. So easy you don't even have to do like 10. It doesn't have to be 15 questions. I just think it's better to do like 4 to 5 questions. And it could be a simple 1 to 5 scale. I work with Volt Athletics as well as a performance coach there, and they do a really, really good session RPE. So like, how hard was the session? Workout notes afterwards. Any other thing you want coach to know? This is for sometimes it's easier for athletes to write stuff than say it to me face to face, right? And then I can approach them with that. Hey, I saw you wrote this, like, let's chat about it. Like, it's not uncomfortable, it's totally normal. And so, but sometimes to get that off their chest, I know for me, like, sometimes it's easy writing an email or texting something. That's why you see insults on the internet, on Facebook comments, because people are hiding behind their keyboards, right? They wouldn't go say that stuff face to face. So it's a little bit easier, especially for a teenager or a young adult, to say, I'm struggling with anxiety right now, and I need somebody to know that, and so it's easier to write that in a workout note. So I think that is definitely a wellness questionnaire of some sorts at the end of the workout, or if it's a weekly wellness questionnaire, I think that's huge. And I think it's such low hanging fruit for coaches. Like, you don't need sports science for that. Right. Like, I can build that in Excel within seconds of watching 10 minutes of YouTube videos. Right. So like, I think, does it take a little extra work? Yeah. But like, again, if you're about the holistic health and wellness and development of an athlete, you will put in that extra work. Right. And then I think kids and athletes, I call them kids, but they're young adults. And I think them seeing my social media profiles, with boundaries, right? Like, I let athletes follow me. I don't follow them back until they reach college, or, things like that. Or, I'm not DMing with them all the time, but like, inviting, showing them who I am, and writing quotes on my whiteboards, or like it's okay to not be okay, or stuff like that, or fun like mental health awareness campaigns within my facility. You know, I think things like that invite the conversation, but don't force it on people, and then it makes them feel a lot more welcoming and comfortable.
Yeah, definitely. Is there anything, so if you do, you do get a red flag either on a questionnaire or talking to them in person, whether that's, a mental health disorder or anything that hasn't been assessed, like what is your next step after that?
For sure. No, that's a really, really good question. I think it differed kind of in the college and the in this realm where they're paying for a service, whatever. And it's tough because and you guys run your own business. It's business side is so tricky, man. I think that was actually the biggest adjustment from college to the private sector, is run like the actual finances and business structure and that type of thing. So you obviously want to retain clients, and that's something that like I've done well of, but like just my mind is never on business. It's about the athletes, and that it's a tough reminder to be like, I got to make sure the business is running well too. But I think the biggest thing I did in the college setting was knowing the resources the campus had available. Communicating with the sports medicine staff first, because they're in the AT's room all the time. And at some schools I was at, the sports med team and the strength coaches, for some reason, there was this weird like disconnect where they didn't want to talk to each other. That was the weirdest shit in the world, man. Like, we are one team, but it was literally, I swear, it's a crapshoot. Whatever school you go to, some sports med, like they just like, they thought they both knew more than each other. It was weird. But then like at a place like Tufts, it was tremendous. We worked together and we're very synchronized. And I think that's just a sign of a well-ran athletic department with good communication. But knowing the resources on campus, and then referring to them to those resources, being a trusted person in their lives, but also understanding that you're a mandated reporter, right? So like, and this, I'm talking strictly at the college level. So like, I knew I wasn't a clinician and couldn't be their therapist, right? And that's not what my job is. I want to be a support system for them. So pointing them and then ensuring that they get to those resources, not like saying, here's a card for the campus psychologist, go see them. Following up with them, understanding, like telling them, showing them that I go to therapy and that it's super important to take care of yourself and your mental health, because the brain is one of the most important, it's not the most important body part you have. So not only just showing them the resources, but like connecting with the campus resources also, and telling them that I referred somebody to them and here's their name and number, or even helping them make that connection. I literally walked somebody to the counseling center one time. So obviously bigger schools, you have certain, clinicians on staff for the athletic departments, but for a small school like a Siena, there was no on-campus, or there was no athletic department clinical psychologist. It was like the counseling center for the school saw everybody, which I think gets tougher, obviously. But that just goes back to reallocating resources. So at the college setting, making sure that you're still doing your job, but also being empathetic and making sure that they're connected with the right resources and that they feel supported. Sport coach was actually kind of the last person I talked to, unless the sport coach was mistreating the athlete about this issue. Because what happens is when you alert the sport coach, and then the sport coach immediately goes to the athlete and says, why didn't you tell me this, blah, blah, blah. Now the athlete doesn't trust you. And now the athlete feels like they're in trouble for telling somebody this, when if you're good friends with the sport coach and you have a good relationship with the sport coach, you should be, working with them simultaneously and be sending the same message, typically. But unfortunately, a lot of sport coaches have different messaging than the strength coaches. And so if that's the case, telling the sport coach isn't going to help. So that's usually, that's kind of the last resort. because usually they'd come in and say, "Don't tell my coach,"
Yeah.
because they're afraid of playing time, which is the most absurd thing in the world. But they're afraid it's gonna factor into their playing time. And then here, I think it's you know, it's I think it's way easier here in the private setting, because I can have really if they have, you know, parents or guardians that they trust, but that they're just nervous to tell. Because I mean, when I was struggling with my mental health, I was nervous to tell my parents, and I felt like this shame and this embarrassment. So, you know, talking to them individually and telling them about available resources, encouraging them to tell their parents, and then following up with their parents via text or phone call, or having them in my office, I think is super vital. I have never not followed up with a parent after an athlete has disclosed, you know, those type of issues, because I'm not letting an athlete ever, you know, go untreated, or like I did for so many years, right? And so they need that help, and so I think it's way easier here, because I can just refer to the parent and ensure that they get the care that they need.
Yeah, I think sometimes coaches get really scared of things that aren't within our specific scope. So I think a lot of coaches,
Mm-hmm.
if this is not lifting related, this is not me, like I don't want to be responsible. But I think that there's a level of, as a strength coach, you know, you were talking about like athletes not wanting to tell the head coach. It's like kids, they're like, don't tell my mom and dad, right?
Right.
As a strength coach, you're kind of like the favorite aunt or uncle, right? Like where you kind of get some of this inside information. And so I think it's important for coaches, and especially strength coaches, to realize that you are in this role where maybe you aren't taking on, like, no, you're not a psychologist, but you have a very important job. And nutrition too, I think, is a big one that coaches are scared to touch. Like, no, I can't tell them to go eat. I can't tell them this and that.
Right.
There's definitely boundaries there as well, outside of our scope of practice, where no, we can't tell them what to eat. We can't give them psychological advice, but
100%.
our role as a strength coach really does cover this holistic wellness, like you're talking about. We are trying to get them stronger in the weight room, but you can't get them stronger in the weight room if they're struggling with eating disorders and anxiety and everything else.
100%. Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's funny you say it, not funny, but it's ironic you say that, because it's something we've said, you know, on my task force for anxiety and athletes and .org, our initiative with the ICDF that I co-founded. We have several phenomenal clinicians that work with athletes, and one of the things that Kristen Mackel and Sarah Ferris say, two clinicians that are on our task force: let the clinicians be the clinicians and let the coaches be the coaches. But that doesn't mean you can't support the athlete either way, right? So I think like a lot of coaches see an athlete approaching them and think, oh, like I'm gonna have to be a clinician and give them advice. Like, no, you just need to be empathetic and be a human being.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you have to have a mental health story of your own. Like, I guess in that way, I am fortunate because I can connect really easily. But like, if you have a brain, you have mental health. All right, doesn't mean you have a mental health disorder. But if you have a brain, everybody has mental health, right? And so, be empathetic towards that and understand that, like, no, it's not your job, so you don't have to be giving clinical diagnoses or advice, but it's still super important to be empathetic and support the athlete, and then the clinician will take care of the rest.
For sure. Tell us more about the initiatives that you are a part of. You said you started, what is it? And
AnxietyandAthletes.org. Yeah.
That, and then I've also seen that you have a Struggle into Strength. Is that right?
Yeah. Struggle to Strength is the organization website that I founded in the past year.
Okay. Yeah. Tell us about that and kind of
Yeah, definitely.
athletes.
Anxiety and athletes so I started sharing I was diagnosed, I guess I'll start with that. I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder when I was 15 years old. I was struggling to get out of bed at the time, was doing about 12 to 15 hours of compulsions a day. So obviously, that leaves not even half the day left to do anything: sports, schoolwork, sleep, eat, social, extracurriculars. So my childhood was good, but I always felt different, and it got to the point, my freshman year, where I was not leaving the house. I was with OCD, like there's this huge stigma, right, about like, oh, I'm so OCD, I need things in a straight line, or I need books in a straight line, or I need to be clean, and it just is not. It's though that's a subtype, but it's just it goes so much deeper than that, and it's not an adjective. It's something that's actually voted one of the most debilitating disorders and diseases in by the World Health Organization. So it's completely debilitating with when it goes untreated, and so and it's a real clinical diagnosis, right? Like you could have obsessive tendencies, but it becomes a clinical diagnosis when you meet with a doctor and they say you have, they look you in the eye and say you have severe obsessive compulsive disorder and you need help. And that was the case for me. And it becomes that debilitating disorder when it's taking up all of your day and you can't get past your daily life without OCD, and you don't know what life is like without it. And so I went into intensive treatment when I was 16 years old. I was playing football and basketball at the time. I was a sophomore in high school. I was actually playing lacrosse too, and had to stop playing all sports. Just plain and simple. Couldn't get on the basketball court. Was tying my shoes 50 times every time I wanted to get on the basketball court. So with OCD, I like to explain it for those people that don't understand what OCD is. The O stands for the obsession. So there are these intrusive, irrational thoughts that your brain can't decipher, that they're not going to happen, but they sound crazy, but they feel so real to people with OCD. And so to combat that anxiety and the debilitating anxiety that you get from those oftentimes violent intrusive thoughts. So for me, I had violent intrusive thoughts. You use these compulsions, whether it be, for me, picking up my phone 25 times to pick it up off the table or whatever. Like, so I did things in numbers a lot, which obviously, I was shit out of luck that my number was 50. Couldn't have been like 2. So obviously I'm taking a tremendous amount of time out of my day to do daily things like brush my teeth 50 times, like till my gums bleed. So it was things like that, like washing my hands 50 times till my hands were raw. So things like that where, opening the car door 50 times, so taking up immense amount of times to try to combat the anxiety. But what happens with that cycle is that's the OCD cycle. It's that those compulsions neutralize the anxiety for maybe like 10 minutes, if that. But then the OCD wants to keep getting fed with those compulsions. So it's like a mountain, hills and valleys, and it just keeps going up. OCD spikes, you do the compulsion, take a ton of time out of your day, and then it goes down, and then that OCD spikes up again because the obsessions don't go away. And that's the kind of the reality of what I live with. The intrusive thoughts are there all day. And so what treatment is, it's a very specific type of treatment. It's called exposure response therapy. And, for a long time I was in, typical, talk therapy where I wasn't really being treated for OCD. And then finally my mom begged for this treatment center. And this person named Amy that, I've been with for a decade now, that is specific to OCD because it's a very specific type of treatment. It's not just sitting on the couch and talking. You do active exposure work. So what you do is you take that debilitating thought so for me, like I was like deathly afraid that my parents were going to die in a car accident. Or that my girlfriend was going to break up with me, or that I'm trying to think of that I was going to drive my car into somebody on the sidewalk, like just like things that like would never happen, or that I was going to just like get up and hurt somebody, which I would never do, right? And so you take those thoughts and then you, instead of doing the compulsion that comes with them, whether it was, walking 5, counting my steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and saying that I wasn't going to do these things. A lot of times it was like doing things what they call like until it felt just right. So I would like close the door until it felt just right, which could be 150 times closing a door. It just didn't matter. I had to say the thought that it wouldn't happen while I was closing the door. So like just excruciating is the best word I can give it. And so you take those thoughts and then you don't do the compulsion. You actually like, one of mine was like, obviously what I said about my parents dying in a car accident. I would have to close the door and say, my parents might die in a car accident, or my parents are going to die in a car accident, and then sit there with the extreme uncomfortability of not knowing if my parents were going to die. And so that over time, you learn how to cope with the debilitating anxiety of OCD, and not doing the compulsions. And then you slowly take time back from your day. And to people, when I explain it to people, they're like, what the fuck? I see your face and you're like, holy shit. It's excuse my language, but it's like, you don't think that's what therapy was. So I would leave therapy and I'm just like, I'm talking like dog tired, like just absolutely drained. And then I have to go, try to survive school or make up schoolwork that I've been missing. And so, I didn't want anybody to have to suffer like I suffer. And there's still people that suffer like I suffer, because it's one of those things that takes time to diagnose still. And we're actively fighting to get people diagnosed within 6 months of having those feelings, because we're losing people still. But I was at the point, obviously, where I thought I was a terrible person because I was thinking about like hurting I was thinking that I was going to hurt somebody. So I wanted to kill myself. I didn't want to live anymore because I felt like I had zero control over my thoughts, zero control over my life. Life wasn't worth living. And so it became so excruciating, and then went through treatment, and the combination of treatment and medication. And, I'm a huge advocate for both those things, and in the right situations and with the right guidance of licensed professionals. And so I got well enough to start sharing my story, and well enough to survive failing the first 2 years of school, of high school, and started sharing my story when I was 16 and a half, 17 years old. And I was the first one at Yale. And then I went on to talk at these conferences, these national conferences for the International OCD Foundation, which is the International Foundation for the disorder. And it's like the community there is like no other. I've never seen an organization that does more for a community and is more tight knit than any other community I've been a part of. And so kept talking at these national conferences, kept talking at like schools and different psych classes, and got bigger and bigger. And then before I got into strength and conditioning, and this is kind of a crucial part of the story that some people know, and it's something that I've kind of tried not to let define me. But I was a student assistant for men's basketball team in undergrad before I was a performance intern, and I was advocating very, very publicly for about OCD and about my mental health, and was in a documentary about living with OCD. And so the head coach and the rest of the coaching staff that I was working for at the time used that information to belittle me every day. Every day I stepped into the office, they would call me things like the next school shooter, the next Unabomber. They would print out pictures of the Unabomber or school shooters and like give them to me and say like, did you take your crazy pills today? Like, girls are never going to want to date you because they know you have a mental health disorder. So like things that that I say simply. I was on another podcast last week. They're like, you should never say to a human being. And so that situation blew up more than I ever thought it would. And it put me in a national spotlight. Quite frankly, I was getting calls. At one day, I was in my 6 to 9 p.m. class as a sophomore in college, and my phone was buzzing. And I was, as I always say, I was not popular, so my phone didn't buzz that much. And I I stepped out of class, and I remember seeing my mom be like, "What the F, are you okay?" And it was literally a story in the Albany Times Union about, you know, university coach under investigation for alleged abuse towards student assistant with mental health disorder or with OCD. And that story by the local paper was followed by a story on ESPN, and was followed by a story on CBS News, and was followed by a story on Sports Illustrated. And soon enough, like, it was in national headlines. I wasn't named, but it was pretty freaking easy to put two and two together about who it was that was being abused, because there was two student assistants and one was publicly advocating for OCD. So you do the math. And so that put me in a spotlight that I wasn't prepared for. Luckily, I had, the IOCDF having my back. I had a really, really good support system with my family, and also the head strength and conditioning coach at the school was at Siena was really, really great. That's kind of where I found my love for performance. When I would travel with the team as a student assistant, I actually ended up being more the head strength coach's assistant, and we would go out to different weight rooms around and meet different strength coaches, and he realized how much I was into training, because I always liked training more than the actual sports I played anyways. And so he took me under his wing to try to protect me from that abuse, for sure. And so, you're put in this national spotlight, right? And I've been publicly advocating for a while now, but in my mind, I'm like, this is going to ruin my career in athletics. Like, I'm going to be known as the whistleblower. I'm going to be known as, the tattletale that, didn't want to take abuse anymore. And to some people, it was like that. And so I had the opportunity, I had two paths to take, I would say. I had the path of revenge and anger, and being what that coach told me I was going to be, right? And then I had the other path of, okay, let's use this platform for education. Let's use this platform for what I've been fighting for the past 7 years, and let's show that mental health and vulnerability should be looked at as our greatest strength, and that mental health needs more awareness, and we can break that stigma. And luckily, with the support of the head strength coach at Siena, with the support of the admin, and my family, and the IOCDF, most importantly, I was able to kind of use that route to make my advocacy even bigger, and kind of put it on a national spotlight. So, I always say preparation plus opportunity equals success, right? And so, was I prepared in the moment for that? No, but I was, in a way, right? I had been working for that opportunity to advocate as much as possible. And, when that opportunity arose, I took that opportunity to make sure that people knew mental health was something I was going to continually fight for, and that it should be treated just the same as physical health. And so, I tell you that story not because, I'm looking for pity, or because, it was because I was in national spotlight, but that's what really sparked anxiety in athletes. The year after that happened, I was given the 2019 IOCDF Hero Award in Austin, Texas, and then I was elected a lead advocate for the IOCDF. And each lead advocate, there's a group of 6 of us. We have each kind of have our passion project, and I came in with the idea of, okay, I want a sub-organization of the IOCDF that is called Anxiety in Athletes, and it's for every athlete that feels lonely and needs resources and doesn't know where to turn. And that's what we've built with anxietyinathletes.org. What started as just an online resource center has blossomed into a task force of like-minded individuals in college athletics and high school athletics and grassroots youth athletics, because I think that area needs more attention too. So we formed this task force to start trying to put together conferences and different seminars and different web content for people that can't get to places for seminars, and just more resources for parents and coaches to how to understand and better foster mental health conversations in organizations. And that's kind of my goal of all this work is to make that a regular thing and make that atmosphere welcoming towards that mental health.
Tom, are you still there?
Oh. Yeah, your screen froze up. Can you still hear us?
Oh no.
We'll give it a second.
I'm gonna end the call.
Yeah, I was gonna say, make sure to save the recording before.
You want me to end it and then?
Well, how do you save the recording? Let me see. He's restarting his computer.
So you should just be able to, I don't want to end it and then end up messing up. I'll just crop this part out.
Oh. Do you know how to save this?
It should just save as soon as we end the call.
Okay.
Did he say that we need to end the call? Is he not able to get back in?
I just told him to see if he can get back on with this.
Yeah. I don't want to end it just because I don't want to have two different recordings. I can just crop this out when he comes back. Uh-oh.
Oh,
There we go.
all right.
Did it work?
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're still recording, so that worked out good.
All right, cool. Sorry about that. I don't know how I just froze mid sentence. But I know my train of thought anyways. But yeah, so it was kind of just trying to fight that mental health stigma with anxiety in athletes and those resources. And so we built that, and our plan going forward is trying to bring more people onto that task force and trying to build that out more and more, and then eventually hold an online conference and seminars, and then hopefully regional and national conferences eventually too. And so that's anxiety in athletes, and then struggleandstrength.org, struggleandstrength.com is my mantra. Struggle and strength is my mantra that my mom and I created when I was in intensive treatment. She get more credit for it, and I was not really thinking of that. But she would say it all the time, like, we're going to turn your struggle into strength. We're going to turn your struggle into strength. Like, you're the strongest person I know. And she kept reminding me of that. She's a saint, and she kind of my parents sacrificed, my brother did too. They sacrificed a lot for me. And so that kind of became our family mantra. And then I realized kind of, building the brand that I had, and when I was building here, I wanted a kind of a one-stop shop for everything, mental health advocacy related that I'm doing, and performance related. And then the IOCDF started, anxiety and athletes started sponsoring and helped me start my podcast, Smalls Talk, which is all about that one. That name I did create. I'm pretty proud of that one. So that's all about mental health, holistic health and wellness, and performance. I think that's been I've met some really good people through that, and I wish I could produce more at a faster rate. I mean, you guys get it. working hours on the floor and then producing a podcast is not easy. So definitely want to do more and more of that, but just another resource. My biggest thing in life is providing value for others. And like I said, I keep saying, like, serving others. I turn a lot to servant leadership. And so I think that's the biggest root of who I am. And so if I can provide any sort of value to anybody, that's my goal. And so that's what Struggle and Strength is about. It kind of has what my story is all about, what I offer, and people can connect with me through that website easy, whether it's to collaborate on stuff, to have me speak, or even, I've had parents just fill out the contact form and then have me talk to their kid because their kid's struggling. I've done that probably, 10, 15 times in the past 3 months. And so things like that. Just meeting people and trying to be with people as much as possible. And then I think also, like, showcasing that I'm still kind of an athlete. I picked up started competing in weightlifting about 2 years ago now, and had never picked up a sport before. Had learned how to clean and as a strength coach, but not really clean. I was pretty novice. And so I started, I actually started as a power lifter, and then started competing. What a coach found me that actually had was a pretty similar story to me, but just more substance abuse related. And he found me in my story when I moved back to this area and started coaching me. He was a national level coach for USAW. And so and then my coach now that he was friends with, my old coach, moved, and now I'm a part of Avitas Weightlifting Club, which is my happy place for sure. I love that's kind of the highlight of my day every day. It's just going there and being part of a community, and then being part of really, really good, being around really, really good weightlifters, and then being coached by, another national level coach, Sam, that just understands, lets me be me, and lets me record stuff, lets me do just be, bring all of me to his club. It's something I really appreciate, because to some it'd be considered baggage, right? And so he meets me where I'm at all the time. Definitely the kind of model coach that I want to be for my athletes. So it's cool seeing, being that coach to athletes, and then having that coach to me, realizing what I'm doing to other athletes too. It's taking what he does to me and kind of giving it to my athletes as well, and learning through his coaching style as well. But just competing in general has been such a blessing, and such a unique experience again, because I still had that competitive fire, and it was cut so short. And honestly, I worked with so many college athletes that took it for granted. And I was like, damn, you don't know what I'd give to lace up cleats and go play right now. Or you don't know what I'd get, just to have that feeling to compete again. So 8 years after I, stopped competing in anything, I picked up Olympic weightlifting, and it's been, probably, I would say, one of the most rewarding journeys I've ever had. Yeah, so that's Struggle and Strength. We're partnering with, we actually are doing a mental health, not to plug the fundraiser we're doing, but we're doing a mental health fundraiser with All In Apparel. I'm actually wearing the shirt right now. It's a Struggle and Strength collaborative t-shirt with their logo on the back. And I'm donating all the proceeds I make to the International OCD Foundation, the foundation I volunteer for. So just trying to spread the word about, what we can turn, what struggle and pain we have, we could turn into, strength and purpose.
Absolutely, man. I love that you're doing stuff like this, because, and I'm starting to see it more and more. I was an athlete in high school that struggled with mental health as well. And then to see, I had good coaches that helped, and I also had those coaches that degraded me and made things worse. And my first exposure on the coaching side was when I worked for the Good Athlete Project. I did an internship with them. They're out of Chicago, and they have a Beyond Strength initiative where they also talk a lot about mental health and just bring it to the forefront. I think athletes, to bring this full circle, we were talking about how it's typically always work harder, be tough, be mentally tough. We throw that phrase around all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's okay to also have struggle, and just to make it more, that you're providing education on what this stuff really is. I think people see mental health and they don't realize how much of a struggle it can be. They see OCD, and you talked about like just needing to have things in a straight line, or they see depression. It's like, oh, it's just, you're just sad. Just do something to make you happy.
Exactly.
Just there's a whole range of issues that people face that people don't understand what they're actually going through. ADHD is another one that's a lot of people really struggle
Super prevalent. Yep.
by it, but people just think you just get distracted. It's like, oh, just get a calendar, make a list so you don't get distracted.
Right.
And
When in reality, like that could be like ADHD is like socially, like people have like a lot of trouble training with other people. So if I had a kid with ADHD, like sometimes they might not be able to train with like 20 other people in the room, right? It's social stimulation. So I think like you said, like understanding those differences is so huge.
It's so huge. And so there just needs to be more education around it. And I think it's way more prevalent in athletes than what we think, because I think athletes use sport and training as a coping mechanism, a lot of
100%.
as a distraction or as something to help that. Yeah, I mean, so it's very prevalent in athletics because athletes tend to have they kind of have that outside motivation factor. They're dealing with other things as well.
Definitely.
This helps them. So just
Definitely.
awareness is.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point about that too, is like one, like, do something, you said do something that makes you happy, when you're depressed. It's like, okay, but you go for that walk and you come back and your depression is still there because it's a clinical diagnosis. Like, I know, like,
Exactly.
that kind of shit drives me insane. And then it's like, you mentioned the using it, using sports as a, as a comfort to what they're going through. And I hear a lot, like the parents are like, oh, it's really an outlet for him or her. And I'm like, okay, but like, what happens when the sport doesn't go well?
Yep.
And they hate the sport. Like, now they have no outlet. So like, the sport can't replace therapy. The sport can't replace understanding emotion. And so I think that's such a valid point that you bring up. And I think it definitely goes. I think that whole mindset is definitely stale, and thinking that like sports and or whether it's sports or art, like, what I just think, sports are, I think art's a little bit different. Like, sports are very outcome based. So like, if your sport doesn't go well, all of a sudden you're upset and now you have no outlet. Right. And so I think it's really, really important to remember that, like, they need true therapy, or they need true help, and not and understanding of like emotions, and not just playing their sport and thinking they're going to get over it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I mean, we take the same approach on, when certain sport coaches talk about mental toughness. I mean, it's, we see that all the time too, of like, they just take the most aggressive approach to, this term mental toughness. And
100%.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think, on my podcast, I had Dr. Alex Auerbach. He works for the Toronto Raptors. He's the director of wellness and development there. And he has said something I never really thought about. He likes to think of it as mental fitness. And I really, really love that term, because that entails understanding your emotions and understanding that you can have two emotions at once, and that, you could be pissed off, and you can also be excited about something. You can be sad, and you can also be glad something happened, or, you know what I mean? So like, and then understanding that, like, we're always working on our mental health and our mental fitness, and it's not about being tough. Like, what, like, it's so funny you mentioned that, Cameron, because it's like, when coaches say that, I'm like, okay, so how do you define mental toughness?
Yeah.
And then they never have a damn answer.
No.
They never know. Yeah.
No, and they don't know what it is. You know,
No.
you're like, what is mental toughness? And they're like, oh, well, it's, you know, they try to
grinding through, you know,
yeah,
like
yeah. It's like, okay, well, you know, if we're gonna, you know, give examples of, they don't ever give an example of, you know, like 4th and 1 and not being able to jump off sides, you know, and
right.
that. No, it's
Exactly.
like,
That's
barely,
focus. That's
yeah,
focus, right?
yeah,
But that's still mental. I would classify that under mental toughness, right?
yeah.
That's that mental fitness of being, you know, locked in enough to not do that. And I think that's why I've really tried to adopt that term mental fitness, because I think one, it encourages the athlete more to be conscious of it, but also like the toughness thing is just so outdated.
It
Yeah,
is.
it is.
Well, it's a consciousness or an awareness. I think people that are aware of the things that they're going through and willing to talk about them and willing to just acknowledge that and put it at the forefront, that's tough too. That's probably tougher than any kind of hard workout that you can get through. It's doing more, just more awareness for coaches and just how to help athletes.
Well, it's exactly what we just talked about. You know, you're depressed, go do something that makes you happy. Well, it's the same thing with, you know, mental toughness. You're doing this thing that, you know, you think is eliciting mental toughness when, you know, the underlying issue is still there after, you know, you drive them into the ground.
Correct. Yeah. I think that's right. And I think that's something that happens a lot that people don't understand, is like avoidance is one of the worst things, right? I think like and that's like a type of compulsion for OCD, is like, so for example, like I would you know, social situations, when I was, you know, doing 15 hours of compulsions a day, I was afraid I would do a compulsion in front of people, so I would avoid social situations. Like, but that's a compulsion itself. It's like avoidance. And so like, but avoiding things that are uncomfortable are never gonna help you, right? Like our growth comes from being uncomfortable. And I think the more you can encourage athletes to be uncomfortable and understand that that's how they're going to grow, the better. But also being empathetic while they're growing is a huge point.
For sure. Okay, well, we're over an hour, so I'm going to ask.
Sorry.
No, good. We can keep going. We just don't want to keep you. So we always try to wrap up with this question, and I'm excited to ask you from your background and perspective. What do you think is the difference between the greatest athletes and then the mediocre athletes, or what is the underlying factor that makes the best of the best?
Coaches that believe in them.
Mm.
You know, I think athletes put in a tremendous amount of work, and I don't ever take credit for any of my athletes' success, right? Like, I don't say they're an Olympian because of me, or they're a national champion because of me. They came here and did the work. I just guided them. But I do think coaches that believe in athletes and show them lifelong skills and help them develop as human beings first, play a tremendous part in showing the athlete they could accomplish anything. And I think that belief is huge. And I think one other thing would be the constant being allergic to mediocrity and complacency. I think when I look at the best athletes that I've ever worked with, it's that they are just literally never satisfied. And there's this speech that I always reference from Matthew McConaughey when he won. I think it was I don't know. I think it's called a Grammy or no, that's an Emmy. I don't know. That wasn't an Oscar, but it wasn't. I think a Grammy's for music, so I don't know. But he won an award, and he got up there and he talked about. Someone asked him who his hero was, and he said his hero is him 10 years from now, because he's always chasing his hero. You know, so if he reaches that, then he's peaked. I love the athlete that never wants to peak, because they always want to reach a new height and a new achievement. And so it's that being allergic to being average. But I also always say, like, being consistently very good is better than being occasionally great. And so I think consistency would, I know you asked me for one thing, but I think coaches that believe in people, the hunger to be better than you were the day before, and then consistency is probably the third thing. I think consistency is so overlooked. I think if we can show athletes of the art of showing up is a skill. Like showing up is a skill. Even on the bad days, just showing up and being there. I would argue, even Olympic lifting, like I probably have more bad days than good days. Like my snatches feel like shit probably 3 out of 5 days, but like the showing up on those 3 days, they still feel bad, like is what's going to drive me forward because I still showed up. So showing up is the third thing for sure.
Absolutely. That's
actually a great point. We've never had somebody mention coaches believing, but it's true. Like look at, Muhammad Ali, look at Jordan, like they always talk about
100%.
That one coach that, Jordan threatened to retire because they
Right, exactly. And it doesn't mean that coaches are taking credit for their success, but I mean, even in my career, like in strength and conditioning, I'm sure you two have had good mentors, right? So like the mentor to me, like Ian Farrell from Siena and Dan Costco, they believed in me. They gave me opportunities. So even like, or, the coach I work with for weightlifting, Sam Axton, like he believes in me as an athlete. So like that drives my success because if he didn't believe in me, I don't know how much I would believe in myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We talk about that sometimes as creating a relationship with athletes that they want to run through a brick wall for you. Like
100%.
that's it. Like that's, if you believe in an athlete, and like you said, we've had mentors and coaches in the past that we would have ran through a brick wall for, and that's it. They believed in us, and so we didn't want to let them down. And it all comes from that relationship and trust that is built along the way. And
Absolutely.
it is a huge part of creating a successful athlete.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love it. Okay, what kind of stuff do you want to plug? Where can everybody find you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Iron T Smalls. So pretty simple. And then my website, www.struggleintostrength.com, has everything you need. It has a tab about anxiety in athletes. It has a tab about Smalls Talk podcast and about my performance work and all my mental health advocacy work. So you can find it. It's kind of a one-stop shop for everything there.
All right, cool. Yeah. Well, we thank you so much for.
Yeah. No, thanks for having me. And we'll definitely have to return the favor this summer for you guys to come on Smalls Talk at some point.
That'd be awesome.
That'd be awesome. Sounds
great.
Good. All right. Thank you so
Tom.
much, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
We'll see you.